The final audit begins not with a song, but with silence. A silence so profound it swallows the memory of a voice that once defined a generation. Beverly Hilton. Hotel. Pause. Suite 434. The air is thick with the scent of luxury and decay, a common pairing in the anatomy of a fall. Downstairs, an industry prepares to celebrate itself, oblivious to the verdict being delivered rooms above. Her wealth was a fortress built to keep the world out, but it could not protect her from the enemy within. The dazzling brilliance of her voice masked a profound loneliness, a crippled fate that followed her from the church pews of New Jersey to the gilded cages of global stardom. This wasn't a sudden accident. It was a sentence carried out over decades, with the final payment collected in a bathtub filled with water and regret. The inventory of her sins was public record, but the inventory of her suffering was a private ledger, closed forever. What remains are the echoes and the cold, hard numbers on a coroner's report, a post-mortem audit of an empire built on a single fragile and ultimately broken instrument. The price of being everything to everyone, and therefore nothing to herself. The fall did not begin with drugs or a man. It began with this impossible bargain. The merger was presented as a union of equals, the princess of pop and the king of New Jack Swing, a fairy tale for the tabloids. In reality, it was an inventory of sins waiting to be cataloged. He was not her savior. He was the embodiment of the street credibility she secretly craved and the chaos her handlers desperately tried to contain. Their bond was not forged in love, but in a shared understanding of the crushing pressure of the spotlight, a pact sealed in smoke and mirrors. The public saw the smiles, the defiant unity against a disapproving world. They did not see the anatomy of the fall beginning in earnest. Every argument, every reconciliation was a public performance. The applause only made the silence backstage more deafening. Her fortune became a shared vault, its contents pillaged to fund a lifestyle that was a caricature of success. This was not a partnership. It was a hostile takeover of a soul already mortgaged to fame. The fatal mistake wasn't marrying him. The fatal mistake was believing that a different cage would feel like freedom. And in that cage, the first notes of her long public collapse began to play, a melody of bruises and pause-broken promises. "Ya crack is whack." The world laughed, turning her desperation into a meme. They missed the real story. It wasn't a denial, it was a negotiation, a plea bargain with the devil, broadcast alive. Her throat, once the vessel of angels, became a casualty of the war within. Each canceled tour, each shaky performance, was another nail in the digital coffin being prepared for her legacy. The silence that followed a failed note was more powerful than any standing ovation she had ever received. It was the sound of an empire turning to dust. The sound of a pause, crippled fate finally claiming its prize. The body grows cold, but the brand must remain warm. This is the first unwritten law of the posthumous economy. Whitney Houston, the human, had become a liability, a portfolio of addictions, bad debts, and inconvenient truths. But Whitney Houston, the asset, was pure unrefined gold. A voice that could be digitized, licensed, and sold in perpetuity. The final messy inventory of her sins was complete. Now began the cold, clean audit of her intellectual property. The solution was as elegant as it was cruel. A hologram. A ghost in the machine, summoned not by a seance but by a boardroom decision. It wore her face. It sang her songs. It even mimicked her gestures, but it could not overdose. It could not miss a show. It could not weep in a lonely hotel suite. This digital doppelganger was the perfect star the industry had always craved. All of the talent, none of the messy, inconvenient humanity. The estate, managed by the ever-present Pat Houston, called it celebrating a legacy. A more accurate term would be monetizing the mausoleum. Her voice, once a force of nature that could shake the soul, was now just data packets traveling through fiber optic cables. Pause. A disembodied echo forever trapped in a lucrative afterlife, singing for its supper long after the singer was gone. This was not a tribute. It was the anatomy of a digital resurrection, a final performance inside a digital coffin. Every empire leaves behind more than just gold and territory. It leaves behind ghosts. And the Houston Empire, built on the impossible octaves of a single voice, bequeathed its most terrible ghost to the one person it was meant to protect. Her daughter, Bobby Christina Brown, was not just a child. She was a living postscript, a sequel to a tragedy that had not yet concluded. She was born into the blinding glare of flashbulbs and the deafening silence of a mansion that was never a home. Her playground was the backstage chaos. Her lullabies were the distant cheers of a crowd that owned her mother more than she ever could. The inheritance was never the millions in the bank. The true inheritance was the blueprint for self-destruction. A roadmap of pain passed from mother to daughter with chilling genetic precision. The same insatiable hunger for an affection that fame could never provide. The same gravitational pull towards men who offered danger disguised as protection. The media watched, a pack of digital wolves waiting for the inevitable echo. They did not have to wait long. The details were a grotesque parody, a sickeningly familiar pattern. A hotel, a bathtub, pause. A silence that was the exact same shape as the one that had swallowed her mother just 3 years prior. It was not a coincidence. It was a legacy fulfilled. The final bitter payment on a debt incurred long ago, a crippled fate passed down like a cursed family jewel. The story did not end in Suite 434. It merely paused, waiting for its devastating epilogue. The echo chamber of solitude. This was the official diagnosis. The applause was a physical force, a tidal wave of adoration measured in decibels and broadcast rights. For 98 minutes on stage, she was a conduit for something divine, a voice that could silence armies and mend hearts. The asset was performing flawlessly, but the performance continued long after the lights went down. The journey from the stage to the presidential suite was a masterclass in human logistics, a silent, efficient extraction. Security formed a human wall, herding the asset through concrete corridors, away from the grasping hands and hungry eyes. No one spoke. The only sound was the squeak of rubber soles and the distant, fading roar of the beast she had just tamed. Then, the click of a hotel door. And the silence. A crushing, absolute vacuum that sucked the air from the room. In this sterile cathedral of luxury, the echo of 100,000 people screaming your name becomes a monument to your own isolation. This was the anatomy of the gilded cage. Every platinum record was another bar on the window. Every multi-million-dollar contract, another deadbolt on the door. The inventory of her life showed an empire valued at $100 million. The post-mortem audit of her soul revealed a state of terminal emotional bankruptcy. Her payroll was a testament to this isolation. A legion of handlers, lawyers, publicists, and bodyguards. An army dedicated to the brand, not the woman. They were there to manage the asset, to polish the product, to ensure the revenue stream remained uninterrupted. They were not there to ask if she was okay. To ask would be a breach of contract. Her marriage was not a fatal mistake. It was a symptom, a desperate, chaotic rebellion against the manufactured perfection that had become her prison. In Bobbi Brown, she found not a savior, but a co-conspirator in her own escape plan. It was a frantic, clumsy attempt to smash the glass of her display case, to prove she could still bleed. The public saw a scandal. The audit reveals a tragedy of two people trying to find something real in a world made of plastic. The voice, that billion-dollar instrument, became the ultimate casualty. It wasn't just the smoke and the poison that wore it down. It was the psychic weight of the lie. Every note she struggled to hit was a cry for help, a crack in the facade. The voice was failing because the woman it belonged to was being systematically erased. The final verdict on this chapter of her fall is cold. The fatal error was not one single choice. It was the slow, methodical takeover of a human soul by a corporate entity that bore her name. She was the ghost in her own machine long before the final silence came.